Urashiki Otsutsuki has been the butt of many jokes in recent years, and for good reason. Losing to prepubescent children and 2D powered middle-aged men doesn't necessarily instill confidence despite narrative implications. Yet at the same time, we can't really ignore them, especially when we have statements saying that he was revered as the strongest member of his clan, which is of course the Otsutsuki clan. So ridiculous plot convenience aside, let's take a look at the feats he displayed along with the abilities he possessed, which are absolutely broken. You see, Urashiki was originally one of the Otsutsuki clan members Kaguya feared would descend upon the land. In fact, his silhouette was shown alongside Momoshiki and Kinshiki's when they were first hinted at in the Naruto anime. Now this might seem a bit contradictory since it was later stated that the Otsutsuki travel in pairs, so him being a part of this group didn't make sense story-wise. That would then somewhat explain why he wasn't featured in subsequent materials, referring to the manga and the movie, though it was later revealed that the real reason behind his absence was the time constraints placed on the movie itself, and since the manga adapted the events of the movie, Urashiki ended up being erased from the material entirely, well, at least until the anime adaptation. Now the first introduction to the character was in episode 53 of the Boruto anime, in which he pretty much no-diffed Toneri Otsutsuki. Though to be fair here, this Toneri isn't necessarily quantifiable since he didn't possess his eyes nor the power of the Tenseigan. So Urashiki defeating him doesn't necessarily scale him above anyone else aside from this weakened version of Toneri. Now the second time we saw him was in episode 57, where he was able to easily bypass the barrier protecting Gaara to enter his quarters, along with being able to bypass his sand shield and Gaara's body as well using his fishing rod. Now this might seem like a massive downscale for Gaara, but it really isn't, since this same fishing rod was able to bypass Sasuke's durability as well on multiple occasions. And though you might argue that Sasuke was off guarded since he briefly turned around to look at Boruto, that argument only helps with the speed at which he would have been able to react to it, not necessarily his durability. That's because there's no way Sasuke dropped his durability mid-battle just to briefly say something to Boruto. So the fishing hook bypassing his durability just means that it scales above him. Now some would argue that the weapon itself just bypasses durability altogether, but that doesn't appear to be the case since while it was able to bypass Gaara's normal sand, it wasn't able to bypass Shinki's iron sand. With that said, the rod does possess other unique abilities such as being able to extract chakra, whilst also imbuing the user with the abilities of the person the chakra was taken from. We first saw this ability when he took Gaara's chakra and was later able to control sand. He also took Sasuke's and Mitsuki's chakra and was later able to use both yellow and blue lightning. He even gained shadow paralysis after taking Shikadai's chakra, and he was also able to gain the ability to perform genjutsu after taking Mirai's chakra. And not only was he able to use it immediately upon extraction for some reason, he had full mastery over the technique and was able to use it on multiple villagers at the same time. So the fishing rod itself is actually pretty overpowered. That aside, let's go back to the scaling in regards to his strength, because as I mentioned before, it was stated that he was revered as the strongest within his clan. That means that by using this statement alone, we could theoretically get Urashiki above Kaguya, Momoshiki, and Urashiki Otsutsuki, though it doesn't actually pan out when you look at his feats, somewhat. To put this into perspective, in episode 120 we see that a full power Sasuke and Gaara couldn't land a single hit on Urashiki, and that's while he was in base, as in he was only using his Byakugans, not his blue Renegans or his red Tolmei Renegan. Mind you, this is the same Sasuke who was able to take Kinshiki to task while he wasn't even at full power, and was later able to keep up with fused Momoshiki with Naruto's assistance. So for him to struggle with Urashiki in any kind of way, who wasn't even going all out, is quite intriguing, especially with the help of Gaara. Speaking of Gaara, this is the same Gaara by the way that was able to catch fused Momoshiki with his sand after he was able to blitz the other 3 Kages. Yet in this fight he wasn't able to catch Urashiki even once despite having the environmental advantage. So is Urashiki faster than fused Momoshiki? Not quite. You see, though Gaara was able to catch Momoshiki with his sand, it doesn't necessarily scale him to fuse Momoshiki since it's clear that he wasn't going all out. This is proven by the fact that Naruto was also able to block and dodge attacks from this Momoshiki as well, even though he was fatigued while he was in base. Then they later had that same Momoshiki keeping up with 6-path Sage Mode Naruto, which is significantly faster and more powerful than base Naruto. So this simply means that the fused Momoshiki base Naruto was keeping up with simply wasn't going all out and was just using the power he felt was needed at that time. The same applies to Gaara as well, since he was later dispatched by fused Momoshiki just a second later. So while Urashiki's feat against Gaara isn't that impressive, Sasuke not being able to touch him while being one of the fastest characters in the entire franchise definitely is. With that said, there are some questionable displays by Urashiki that takes him down a notch, such as him not outright destroying Boruto and Shinki in episode 124. Though I will say that him taking it easy on them plays more so into the arrogance of the Otsutsuki, since we know that he far surpasses them based on his feats against Sasuke. Then you also have the fact that Boruto damaging Urashiki while being amped by the Jogan isn't necessarily an anti-feat, since the Jogan amp isn't quantifiable, especially since Boruto displayed similar feats against fused Momoshiki. Now Urashiki did get blitzed and one-tapped by a combination attack from Boruto and Naruto, but there is a reason for that. You see, Urashiki has an ability called temporal rewind, where in preparation for being attacked, the user activates their Renegon as glowing blue, and the technique then allows them to warp several seconds into the future then back to the past. Now while the technique is normally defensive in nature, essentially allowing the user to seemingly teleport away from danger, repeated usage of the technique itself could grant a pseudo form of clairvoyance. So using the acquired knowledge of how the near future will happen, a perfect counter strategy can be formed from being able to accurately tell how the enemy will behave, though this could end up being used against the user as well. This actually played out in episode 134 when Jiraiya caught Urashiki in the belly of one of his toads. Now Urashiki could have easily escaped this using space-time ninjutsu or just ripping the toad open, but he didn't think he needed to. He pretty much continued to play with them like he was doing before using temporal rewind, which eventually caused him to get nerfed by the toad's stomach acids quicker than everyone else did. That's because temporal rewind causes you to relive moments over and over again by stepping between the past and future, thus overlaying the negative effects of the stomach acids. So when Urashiki got taken out by Naruto's Rasengan, it wasn't because he's weak, but more so because he was weakened. With that said, he wasn't necessarily one-tap, since he got up immediately and consumed his own eyes in order to evolve into a more powerful form. This form was quite powerful, but nothing changed since he just dominated them like he was doing before, but just didn't kill them, just like he was doing before. Though he apparently gained the ability to consume attacks with his mouth, which is insane to think about, and he also gained a variant of Almighty Push as well. Though it does appear that those new abilities came at the cost of his blue Renegon's ability to perform temporal rewind, along with his red Renegon's ability to perform Yamotsu Hirasaka. This ability is said to be the progenitor of all space-time techniques. It allows the user to open rifts in the fabric of space that then allows them to instantaneously transport themselves to another location. The openings can be used to connect two different spatial locations within the same dimension, or to create pathways that links two dimensions together. By then entering these spatial tiers, the user is able to retreat, disorient enemies, or execute ambush attacks at a moment's notice. Oh, and by the way, Urashiki used this a lot to escape attacks before, so I think it would have been useful when he got clapped by the father-son Rasengan, but he decided to throw this ability away to turn into a bird, I guess. Oh, and speaking of Rasengans, or the Rasengan in this context to be exact, Urashiki getting murked by a one-tailed kid Naruto and pre-Karma awakened Boruto has been memed upon for a very long time, and for good reason. Even so, I still think that a lot of context was removed when coming to certain conclusions about that fight, such as Jiraiya damaging Urashiki's hand with a giant Rasengan, or Sasuke literally striking him with Kirin, one of the most powerful attacks in the franchise. So Urashiki was heavily nerfed when he was killed, even if you argue against him still feeling the effects of the poison. Though I would have preferred if they had Boruto use the Jogan here as well, since the amp itself isn't quantifiable as yet. So for the most part, Urashiki is really carried by the feats he displayed against a non-nerfed Sasuke back in the Sand Village. Everything after that can be explained away by him not going all out due to his arrogance, and the fact that he was literally poisoned. Now, using all of this information, if I was going to place Urashiki somewhere in terms of overall strength, he would at least be relative to full power Sasuke, who is at least stronger than base Momoshiki, and somewhat relative to fused Momoshiki. So yeah, he isn't isn't quite the strongest member of the clan when you have Otsutsuki such as Urashiki and Shibai. Then again, if you put that statement into context, it could make sense. Momoshiki made no mention of Urashiki when he arrived on the planet, which could mean that they thought he was dead. Then you also have the fact that Momoshiki knows that Shibai no longer exists within this dimension, which would call into question whether he would factor into that statement as well. So when we're trying to make sense of this specific statement, we have to take into account when it was made and who was considered a part of the clan at that time. Oh, and by the way, it could also be the case that Urashiki is indeed stronger than Momoshiki, absent of whatever amps Momo consumed over the course of the manga. So instead of outright ignoring the statement itself or just saying that it doesn't make sense or that it's wrong, just try to interpret the statement in a way where it does make sense. I think that would help. With that said, let me know your thoughts. Do you think Urashiki is stronger than base Momoshiki, absent of Momoshiki consuming the 8 tails or the 9 tails or even eating a choco fruit, which he did before he came to the planet? So there's a lot of things we have to discuss to kind of like weed this out for it to make sense, but based on what I have provided, do you think the statement could pan out if we interpret it in a way where it could make sense, or do you guys want to just ignore the statement or just say that it doesn't make sense, so we're just gonna say that it doesn't exist even though it does exist? Some people will do that, of course, but for the ones who are more interested in trying to get to the truth of the matter, just discuss it down below. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Let me know why, of course. And also like the video and subscribe, of course, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.